G'day, AJ Mahari here with a comment response. On the video I did, BPD apologies don't mean any change, which is very true. Commenter left this comment. Please could you do a video or point me in the direction of one you've done before on memory loss with somebody with BPD? Whilst I understand that people may have memory loss from their childhood, what I'm really struggling with is understanding how, in the face of absolute, irrevocable evidence of things they've done during the revenge discard phase, they not only deny, but seemingly have no memory of it and think you've made it up and blame you for, quote, always being the victim, unquote. Well, let me just state straight up, in a situation like this, when somebody with BPD, this is going on, and they go to you, they say, oh, you're just always the victim, aren't you? I'm not doing anything. I don't know what you're talking about. Know first and foremostly that that's them projecting. Because, yes, you might be being victimized. Yes, you might be sort of hurting in a victim place because you've been victimized. But when they say that to you, that is them projecting out their consummate always having to be the victim and taking no personal responsibility or accountability for anything that they've done. So first of all, know that is an abject projection on their part. But at the same time, you could be being victimized, right? But it doesn't mean that you're always the victim, the way that they say that in a projective, blame shifting, crazy making, abusive way. So let's just go back for what's been said so far. BPD and memory loss. Well, I'm going to have another video or a podcast, not sure which it'll be, coming on that. I will speak more about what actually can be memory loss issues in BPD, but here I'm basically here doing this comment response to answer all the things that can happen that have nothing to do with BPD amnesia, as it's so often spoken about out there by fluff and stuff creators who don't know what they're talking about. For example, can you relate to this? I don't know if the commenter or anybody else. Can you relate to maybe you're with an untreated petulant borderline and they've raged at you and they've screamed at you and they've blamed you for so many things. And then they say, well, they don't remember, which is what this commenter is getting to as well. What are you talking about? I didn't do that. No, I didn't do. And then they'll say, well, last week you did, blah, blah, blah. It's not necessarily BPD amnesia at all. It's often what it feels like for them and how it might be for them. I won't even go into right now because it can be dissociative. It can be triggered dissociation, emotional dysregulation, etc. But even with that, in most people's cases with BPD, the highest majority of them all, they're not having, quote, BPD amnesia. They're not, some may be dissociated enough that they're going to get into a fugue state. They're going to have depersonalization and or derealization. But mind you, I experienced all that when I had the 4 core traits of BPD and dissociation, and I still knew what day it was. I still knew where I was. I got a little lost in the odd detail here and there, but for the most part, I remembered everything. Maybe not in perfectly the right sequence, but if I would have said after something that got me, like where I got triggered, and I'm not saying somebody else, but my own thing, where I got triggered into this state, and then what happened after that crashed me out of the dissociation. By the way, I'm responsible for what happened in that dissociative aspect of what, yes, I took an action there that I'm not going to share that was horrible and wrong, and I was in therapy, and I took it to therapy the next day, and I owned it immediately. The point being, most people are going to claim, quote, BPD amnesia, unquote, or you're going to think that based on misinformation and the way people aren't accurately describing that out there, because they'll say to you up and down forevermore, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do that. I don't remember that. I didn't say that. And it can often be that something could be a tad murky for them, but they know that they've said some things. They know they might have taken some actions. It might be a little jumbled, but it's not totally forgotten. They're just lying, often knee jerk, but doesn't matter. Maybe the wiser the wherefores. They're lying to avoid responsibility and accountability, straight up. So please know that that's the majority of situations with the majority of people with the patterns of BPD or diagnosed and or untreated or not that well treated. They've dabbled in treatment, big deal, nothing's changed. So that's important for the commenter and other people to know. Now also to where the commenter said, I understand that people and people in general with trauma from childhood or people with BPD may have memory loss from their childhood. Well, there is that, but it's not just considered memory loss. Like there's something, pardon me, like there's something about their memory that isn't working. Okay, because people can have memory loss for all kinds of reasons, but so memory loss from childhood can be the repression, blocking from conscious awareness, traumatic experience, but it usually would come out in therapy and or is coming out sideways from people with BPD that are triggered, and this is maybe they've had this kind of childhood abuse or SA in childhood, and maybe they're not consciously aware of it. So in that regard, it's lost from conscious memory, but it's not quote memory loss because it's still potentially and likely at some point in time in most people's lives with BPD, if they go get treatment, it's going to come out one way or the other. They might not get the conscious awareness of it, but they'll be acting it out. They'll be reacting to things and then saying they don't remember stuff. When what's repressed from childhood is conscious memory loss, but not unconscious, so not entire memory loss necessarily. So I want to go too deep into this in this video, but thought it was important to share that as well. But yeah, I mean, and I speak to clients with BPD who have these issues going on. But I speak to like many people who, when we're trying to look at the roots of people's codependency when I'm working with clients, they might start off by saying, no, my family was great. My parents loved me. Everything was fine, which could be somewhat true and still not everything was fine. And there's ways people can get hurt in childhood. But guess what? A lot of people with codependency, and the younger you are as a child, that gets filed away in your unconscious as well. So it's not in your conscious memory, or pieces and parts of it might be, depending on if it was really how you got hurt in a way versus if you were really traumatized. So a lot of people with codependency, when I'm working with them, they'll say, well, I don't remember anything really. And I'm like, well, could your mother or father, could something have hurt you, like even if it wasn't intentional, and etc. And people will have different responses, and then I can give them homework and exercises to do between sessions to try to tease out and think about and ways to get back in touch with childhood. Because often, especially with codependency, various different woundedness from childhood, so it could be really trauma, and sometimes it's not exactly that, but it's wounding adverse experience. And many people have just not necessarily repressed it, people with codependency. Some have repressed some things, but many have just like chucked it, like it doesn't matter anymore. Oh, something happened when I was 7. Who cares now? So it's a disavowal and just kind of like a denying and a sort of putting aside that might not even get repressed into unconscious, the unconscious memory, if you will, which sounds like a oxymoron because what's in the unconscious isn't available to conscious right now memory, but it doesn't mean it's gone. So anyway, a lot of people with codependency I work with will say this at first, and then I ask questions and we start going through the process and we look at family of origin, etc. And then it's like, oh, I remember this and I remember that. And, working with someone right now that I can't say anything about really what's going on, but they started off with a narrative of their own, very hard on themselves, how they're less than and they're not as good as anybody else in the world. And they felt that way in their family of origin. And then the more we're going through the process and I ask questions and they explain, and now they're starting to catch on. And it's like, oh, I remember this and I remember when so-and-so did that and that and that. Of course, I can't say anything specific. But so with people with BPD, more often than not, when they don't remember or they say they don't remember, like, because like 3 seconds ago, they just cussed you out and screamed at you maybe spit on you, maybe they pushed you, maybe they hit you, and all of a sudden it's out of sight, out of mind. No, it's usually lying to avoid accountability and responsibility. That's the number one thing to know. However, I will talk about there's another aspect goes into I don't want to make this video forever, right? So I will do something soon on what might be actual memory loss versus repressed memories, because not the same thing necessarily either. And so the commenter is really struggling to understand. Uh, okay, what I'm really struggling with is understanding how, in the face of absolute irrevocable evidence of things they've done during the revenge discard phase, they not only deny, but seemingly have no memory of it, and they think that the commenters made it up, blame you for it as if you're always being the victim, even when presented with photos of their revenge actions. Excuse me, I'm just still getting over like a nasty cold I had. Where was I? And then the commenter goes on, well, let me stop here and say that yes, if you show a person with BPD who's not even necessarily got any BPD amnesia, not really forgetting everything, might be a little blurry if they've had some dissociation, okay? But dissociation is to varying limits and degrees, and often for a lot of people with BPD, it won't go to the depth of actually forgetting what happened. And the other thing I'd like to just explain here, for example, is if somebody with BPD is raging, screaming at you and everything, and then like taking revenge on you, etc., and then they're gonna go, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't say that. I didn't do that. It can, so even for people without BPD, if you get really angry, you might not fully remember every minute of the, say, like a road rage incident, or you got really angry at like a service person because they just weren't giving you the service that you were paying for, and that happens to a lot of us, doesn't it? And whether you get really angry or not, but if you get really angry, then you might not remember. Like you might be thinking after, like maybe you told them pack up your stuff and go, and I don't expect me to pay for this because what are you doing, or something like that. And then the person go, and maybe there's a bit of back and forth, and it's just like normal angry, even with people who don't have BPD or any personality disorder. There's elements of dissociation that will happen within that stress, because when we're feeling anger to whatever varying degrees, so this is non-personality disorder people I'm talking about, we can still have a little bit of dissociative sort of joggling, shaking up our ability to remember, because emotion, the emotion of anger, when a strong emotion is strong enough, which doesn't have to be super strong to be strong enough, floods us, or we're really like up in that. You don't have to have BPD or personality disorder. And it's the same for people with autism. I know because I am high functioning autistic, that it's not going to be anything in the brain that it's just about one thing. Happens to everybody. When you're feeling strong emotion, you are not thinking as straight or as well or as clearly or as logically as you could be otherwise. And so you might have, say, this issue with a service person, and you've asked them to leave, and it was really conflictual, but not horribly conflictual. And then they leave, and then maybe you go to tell your husband or your wife or your friend or your partner or who's ever, or somebody, you go tell them about it, and then you're like, I don't really remember what happened after I said this. And then I think, did they pack up their stuff right then, or did they say something else first? That kind of thing. So first understand that strong emotion, not just anger, but strong emotion of anger can cause anybody a little dissociative confusion, is what I'm trying to say. Can be the same for people with BPD, even with a lot of rage, that they might not remember it all or the sequence of everything. They could be a little bit like messed up on some things, but they don't totally forget it. That's usually, more often than not, a lie of deflection and escaping their way to escape accountability or responsibility. And maybe a lot of people don't know enough about this that at that point, it's kind of useless if you do this too. But you can at least call them out and say, BS, I don't believe you. I don't believe you don't remember it. You're just trying to escape responsibility. If you feel like saying that, it's not going to change anything. So yeah, the commenter is now so to what the commenter just said. Oh, I've had so many clients talking about this over 35 years. People have visually, as the person with BPD is in a rage, they have recorded them. So more recently than like super long ago, they recorded them with their phone. Like they've taken out their iPhone or the smartphone, whatever it is, and the Android or whatever, and they just push record. And the person is enraged with BPD. They might say, "What are you doing? Don't record me," whatever. But they keep on going with the rage because they're locked into that. And there's sort of something biologically that can happen to be locked into that, whether one has BPD or not. But they have stronger patterns of these repetition compulsions and impulsive anger and rage. So you might be recording them and they're raging and screaming at you. Okay, then that stops or whatever happens, and then so you stop the recording, and then maybe don't talk about it. Maybe they take off, maybe you take off, maybe you just can't talk right then. Maybe you're just so like confused what happened. But you have either a video and or an audio recording of their yelling and screaming. So maybe it's at another time. You sit down, you play it for them. Here's the evidence, right? You just did this and I got you doing it. They'll still sit there and go, I didn't do that. That's not me. What? Nah. And what's going to be happening then? They're still lying. They obviously hear this. So even if they forgot, now they're being reminded. But they're still going to deflect, deny, disavow, lie, because now it's all about defense mechanisms, right? And I'm not saying there's anything okay with this, but they can't take personal responsibility and they can't take accountability. They don't know what to do at that point. And I'm not saying, hey, so poor them. No. But they literally don't know how to do these things called taking responsibility or accountability. And there's a lot of reasons why, but I won't go into that right now. And it doesn't matter. So even when you show them the evidence or they're hearing themselves screaming at you, let's say it's half an hour later that you're showing them this or playing it, the audio for them. And they're like, nah, I know where you got that. They'll say the dumbest things. That's not me. I didn't do that. I don't care. They might be more quickly to rage, to like really deny and then just want to tell you like, F off, I'm out of here, or whatever they might do because they just don't want to deal with it. So I just want, what the commenter raises here, the question is really a good one, and I don't know if I've talked about before, but doing it now. Please know that for most people with BPD, it's not, quote, BPD amnesia. Because, and I want to say, you know, in my days of the four core traits of BPD, etc., and therapy, and I'm not minimizing four core traits, by the way, because that's what they're calling remission today, and that's garbage. That video or podcast will be coming too. But I remember, like I said, when I had a rage episode, as I did that when I was young, many moons ago. And I had some I one time raged, well, more than once, maybe it was 3 times, different times, raged so incredibly horribly, could not control myself whatsoever, which I'm not making any excuses for. I went to therapy and I healed that and I changed that and I took responsibility for that. But some people talk about raging, people with BPD, or talk about raging and seeing red. I raged so hard on 3 different occasions, which I don't even know what that means versus other times I rage. I saw white, and it literally scared me. Like, I think I literally sort of started de-escalating the rage just based on, oh, God, what was that? So the point is, I just wanted to share with you, because I love sharing this stuff. No, not really. But if it helps somebody, I don't mind. It's in my past, a long way in my past. But, and I took responsibility for it. But when I raged to that extent that I saw white and it scared me and I got all neurotic and everything in the middle of my whatever I was raging about, I still remember that to this day. I remembered it then. I remembered it 3 minutes, 2 seconds later, 5 minutes after the rage. I don't remember why the rage stopped, but no, I was freaked out by seeing white. But other times I would rage and such. Whenever I stopped, I guess I don't know all the time when and why it would stop, or rages wouldn't always last the same length of time. But they were horrible, my rages were. And I'm not making excuses, but I definitely learned how to rage because I had 2 raging cluster B parents who were alcoholics that raged. And And when you're a kid, what do? You emulate what you see. So I thought, well, if I yell and scream, maybe it'll help me somehow. It never did. Never did with anybody that I raged at, obviously. And I learned that in therapy, and I don't do that. I haven't done that for like over 40 years of my life. Really never seriously been in a rage since then. But so the thing is, I rage to the point of seeing white. The only reason I tell you this is because that's pretty strong rage. You know what I'm saying? That's like at the outer edge of what you're gonna be able to do before you make yourself pass out or something worse happens to you. If it was gonna. And the thing is, I remembered maybe not every single word I said, but I knew that I was raging. I remembered the fear that built in me, the panic I had to the seeing white. Was I thinking so much about who I was raging at? No, unfortunately. Did I feel a whole lot of really bad about it? No, because I didn't understand the impact I was having on them. That's what I'm trying to explain. Doesn't mean my rage was right, doesn't mean I wasn't abusing somebody. All that's true. But in those moments, the key thing that you need to know before I go on about everything else is I didn't forget. Like, and I was a responsibility taker though. So if somebody after the fact, till I learned to stop all that. But if that person would have had me recorded, I didn't even need the recording because I already knew that I did something really bad. Even if I didn't remember it all, I didn't forget it all. So I'm telling you that's an extreme rage place to be. And not everybody, who has BPD now or whatever is the same. But this is why I largely, based on my own personal lived experience of decades ago, don't believe this crap. Are there some cases where it could be BPD amnesia? Yeah, but they're few and far between. So just know that. And so a lot of people with BPD in denial, not knowing how to take personal responsibility or accountability. Remember, I never had BPD full blown. So I was able to right away after feel remorse and cry and be upset and but still, then I was still in my own upset. Yeah, feeling a little bit for the person I raged at, etc., but all lost in my own what's going on with me thing. But I never had anything called BPD amnesia is the point. So when you show them evidence and they just lie to you more, like, "I didn't wasn't me, I don't know, well, that doesn't mean anything," or the myriad of hundreds of other stupid, non with no meaning in them statements they can make, they're lying to you to avoid responsibility and accountability, and they're often lying to you like they lied. I know this is true of me, although I didn't lie a lot, like, if I realized I mean, at a certain point, but maybe when I was in my teens, oh, no, there was some things that happened with my parents, and I lied my ass off because I didn't want my father to beat me up or unalive me. Because there was a couple threats where it almost got that bad, but he would beat me up on the regular. And so you bet you lie to avoid a beating. This is what's in the childhood, and not to excuse abuse. This is what's in the childhoods of a lot of people with BPD. It does not excuse abuse. It does not give them a pass, go and collect $200 after you behaved horribly. But no, it doesn't. But the thing is, this can be the repetition compulsion from unconscious, knee jerk, um, defense mechanism lie, like they did to save their butts in childhood, right? And so that is dissociative experience coming into the here and now from their past that they project out onto the situation in the here and now. But nowhere in that dissociative, uh, you know, fighting kind of like repetition compulsion, raging, denying, etc., lying, that's not something that's forgotten. It's just something they're not so consciously aware of right now that they're repeating. So I hope that really helps. I don't want to go on and on about it. Really want to make that point, though, that most of them aren't forgetting it. And the commenter then says, so even when presented with the photos of the revenge actions, they still saying they don't remember. Lying. And then the commenter says, do untreated borderlines simply forget and erase their actions? No. I think I've more than answered that question at this point. I could have read that first and then what I said. No, they don't often. They don't usually, most of them, at all. So please know you're likely being extremely lied to, or were being extremely lied to. And then the commenter said, or is it internally acknowledged but shame based that they can't admit it? It can be that as well. It can be it's definitely internal. It's definitely shame based, but it's also like potentially, more often than not potentially, it's how they feel, what's moving them into the action of how they're being abusive and lying, which there's no excuse for that, is based on repetition compulsion. So they're like automatic, they're unconscious. I feel this way, you're saying this crap to me. It's just like when mom or dad did this to me. They might not even make the association. So it's internal to them, yes, and it's going to be impulsive and a repetition compulsion, a reenactment of trauma. They're going to do it again with you in the here and now. So it's like double dissociation, if you will. It's dissociation coming from the past. It's some dissociation to some level in the here and now, smacking together and whatever. And they're reenacting, usually, trauma from childhood in the here and now. And this is what really makes it next to impossible if they're untreated, but still it's not excusable, for them to take responsibility or accountability because they don't know what's driving the fact that they have to defend against doing that, which is often childhood trauma. So it's definitely shame-based and it's definitely internal, but there's way more to why they can't admit it than just, oh, it's shame-based, it's internal, they feel really awful and guilty now, because whether they associate to those feelings now or not after, in the here and now, they may or they may not. They may not be able to, they likely, most of them, and I know from my own experience years ago, you don't really understand why you did what you did. And therefore, it becomes to the person who's done, person with BPD who's been acting out and abusive, it becomes a more horrifying, incredibly more emotion dysregulating terror that you have no idea why, what happened or what you're hearing, or if you can catch up. You have no idea why you would do that. And so then that's another reason why they're going to say, I don't know what you're talking about. No. Because they're fearing what they're actually feeling and experiencing internally is more than shame or guilt. They're not even on board with knowing that yet consciously, unfortunately, but does not absolve them from what they're doing. The reality of that internally is it gets so much more dysregulating, the thought that maybe they did do something horrible, then they defend against that immediately because now they're terrorized and now they're feeling totally out of control. And they're totally out of control to begin with why they do what they do to you. But that's not an apology for anything that a borderline does. That's just an explanation, and I hope that helps. And commenter said, it really felt like they genuinely denied things because they didn't think they did it. Well, they can be very convincing because they're living out a repetition of something that likely was 100% like very real and very like a genuine terror of something in their childhood, right? And that's what they're reenacting now. So you said, the commenter said, it really felt like they were genuinely denied things because they didn't think they did it. Okay, but when you've got evidence, excuse me, and they're still denying it, it doesn't mean how genuine it doesn't matter how genuine they seem or if there's a genuine component to something forgotten. When you show them evidence and they still don't do anything but keep up what they're doing, don't overfeel for them. Think of yourself. Think of their lack of accountability and lack of responsibility taking because, oh, you said because they don't think they did it. There's no way to really measure if they truly don't think they did it. They're defending against they did it. They may internally not really realize they did it. Doesn't mean it's forgotten, though. They're still responsible for it, is what really matters. And So even if they didn't remember it, let's say they were being genuine, although when you show them a picture, they should recall something, right? They should acknowledge the picture. But even if they're not remembering it, so friggin' what? It doesn't change the abuse one iota, does it? They need to be held accountable. That doesn't mean you're going to successfully hold them accountable, that they're going to go, oh, yeah, I realize I did that. Geez, I'm sorry. No, but you need not to feel sorry for them and back off of what you are putting forward that you know damn well just happened to you, and it's not excusable. Commenter says, and with grandiosity also, like they were better than me. Oh, and I had made it all up, and it was, in fact, me who needed the help. Oh, that happens a lot. And by the way, is that grandiosity in BPD? Yes, it can be. And is grandiosity, so grandiosity is in within borderline personality. It doesn't ipso facto jump to narcissistic traits or narcissistic personality disorder or comorbidity of a person with BPD with any narcissistic trait. Grandiosity, to a much lesser extent than narcissists, exists within people with BPD as well. So what was happening there was the grandiosity that exists within BPD, which is like a secondary, if you will, defense mechanism to BPD splitting. So it's much stronger in narcissistic personality disorder, where in grandiosity, although they split too, grandiosity is a more major defense in narcissists because they're taking supply and having a different response to what you're trying to hold them accountable for, kind of like I got you. It inflates their ego. It's them gaining supply so they can start to feel better. So their grandiosity kind of there. So then they will be taking no responsibility and blaming the other person from a less emotionally dysregulated, like not an emotional place, and a not an emotional dysregulated place, like the person with BPD. So that grandiosity you're speaking of, like they were better than you and like you'd made it all up and that it was you that needed help, that's the overcompensatory defense strategy, impulsively, unconsciously happening, repetition compulsion, where the borderline goes to, I'll show you. So they go to this one up. It's kind of on the Cartman drama triangle where they are the victim, they think, right? But then they victimize you because they go into being a persecutor. And then you, as a codependent, go from rescuer to victim. And then at the end of that cycle, this can happen really within minutes, seconds, whatever. Then you're presenting the evidence, and then they go from victim, they might still be somewhat in victim mode, they go back to persecutor. And with borderline defense, they will say, with some grandiosity and BPD, they will say, they will one up themselves and put you down. And this happens a lot with people with BPD. Overcompensatory defense strategy, they then say, I don't know who the hell you think you are, because I didn't do what you're saying. You made it all up, didn't you? When they know you didn't. They know something, or sometimes maybe they don't, but they usually do. Like I pulled this back in my day too. You know, like I was responsible for something, whatever, and then like I might be getting that a little bit. But I might have also, yes, I did sometimes say, you know what, who are you to say all this to me? And you know what? And there might have been a little bit of truth. There isn't always, but a little bit of truth to a certain partner I was with who would often do stuff to me first. And I might be reacting, but still, whichever it is, it's not okay. And the point is that, so then I would point out to that person that I was with, because this is the person I was with during these times, I'd say to her, well, but you know, like you did this and you did that, and therefore, like, you made me angry, which is not appropriate, which is not, that's avoiding responsibility. But the point is, I didn't know what I was doing back then, but it was this overcompensatory compensatory strategy of the borderline who does the one up of I'm better than you and who the hell are you and how dare you say this to me and you made it all up and you need help, not me, because screw you. Yes, that's a little bit of grandiosity in BPD in that overcompensatory way. They go back to persecutor. Of course, this is unconscious. And now they're going to fry your butt Because how dare you hold them accountable or try? How dare you say they did any of this stuff they just did? So, yeah, they do that. And it's crazy making, but you know what you know. And you might need some help for codependency or what you've been through, but you don't need like the help that they need that they're trying to say that you need. But that happens with people with BPD as well. I hope that explains that. And again, it's not making any apology for it. And the commenter said it's confusing. Yes. Scary, hurtful, and bewildering. Yes. And all of it from what you're saying here and what I believe that it's true for most people with BPD. And when you show a picture or you show a video or you show a recording and they're still like, I don't know what you're talking about, something's really wrong with you that you could think that that's not me. I mean, they'll just say the most incredulous, ridiculous, like magical fantasy based, like, and they know reality. They know that's them in the video. They know that's them in the picture. But they're like, who cares? And not even conscious maybe of how they're reacting. So I'm just getting passionate now because I think that a lot of people BPD pulling this. I pulled it, but I had it pulled on me by other cluster Bs just saying karma's real. But point being, what this has done to you, commenter, I feel so much for you. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate. Please, share your experience below if you can relate and what you think. And because people with BPD are doing this, again, it's repetition, compulsion, reenactment of something that dissociatively comes, they don't know what it is, comes through them from childhood to embolden their defense now that they're not even like consciously aware of how they're defending. It's knee-jerk now. It's impulsive reenactment and reaction to what's happening now. And whatever they do with that, and they may not be aware of all of what's coming from their past or why they're doing what they're doing. And so, it's like, so you end up confused. It's scary, hurtful, and bewildering. And what they're doing there is fighting you over what you're saying they did as if you're the object of the representation of the worst wounding parent. And it doesn't matter that they're in two realities at once that way, because even if somebody forgot it, and I don't believe that this person you're describing forgot it at all, then when you show them the picture, or people that have audios and videos, I'll just give a quick example. I had a client once, without going into too many details, so stuff was happening, blah, blah, blah. And they because they were married to a person with BPD. And so what he did was he decided to get, because you can get them at, all these places now, cameras, etc., all kinds of cameras, and sort of more the spy type camera thing. And I don't know what's legal or not, but if it's in your own house, I don't know. And he put these cameras in places where, like, they look like alarm clocks. They look like other things. And so one of his, lots was going on with with his wife with BPD at the time. But one of the things that I think, I'll just say this in a general way, it doesn't identify anybody. One of the things that a client a long time ago was concerned about was that he was on a certain medication for something. He didn't have BPD though. And he believed that his wife was taking them, like using his medication and just, to get high or whatever. I don't know. And so he put cameras around, caught her dead to rights, not only getting the medication out, opening it, taking a pill out or two pills or whatever, swallowing it, all that on video. She was confronted with it and said, I don't know what you're talking about. You're crazy. So you see, they have formidable defenses, but within those defenses, it's absolute lying. And then you said, thanks once again for an insightful video. I owe you my sanity. BPD apologies don't mean any change. Well, I'm really glad you're finding my content helpful. I hope that this will add to the helpfulness of content for you, commenter, and for many other people. Because whether most of them remember something, remember mostly more than not. Most of them are reenacting so dissociative aspects, but I still believe, and I can't know this for sure, because is there a smaller percentage of people with BPD that really aren't remembering? Could be, but I don't believe it's in this case. It's just the way you describe everything, commenter. And then when you put the evidence out, and whether it's a picture, an audio recording, a camera's recording them, a video recording. See, what do I know about people with BPD? Through all kinds of clients, my own lived experience in the past, people with BPD in my family of origin. What do I know about all this from the inside out and more? More often than not. So let's say 85 to 90 to probably 95% of the time, they're lying. And they might not remember everything, every detail. No, they probably won't. But it's not like when they look at the picture, I think they know not who they are inside, but they know, hey, that's me, right? Or whoever, And if it's a video or an audio, like, yeah. So, commenter, it's also kind of like the end result of this when people with BPD do this for all the reasons they're doing it, which I'm not excusing what they're doing at all, the lying, to not be responsible, to not be held accountable, and also that dissociative piece from the past that comes through, and it's repetition compulsion stuff. Why ever they were yelling, screaming, doing whatever they did to you in a punitive, punishing, abusive way, uh, they're not gonna. Yeah, high percent, like 95% of them are not going to be forgetting all of that, and they can have different aspects of dissociation monkeying with what they actually know or not know. The other thing I'll just add to that is, and when they're experiencing that, which they don't understand what that is, like I'm describing what it is, and I knew what it was when I went through it, but a lot of people with full blown or more severe BPD wouldn't know that. Like when I had BPD, I don't have that anymore. I never had full blown BPD. The other thing that can be happening is that they're feeling so like they've now experienced something dissociatively happen that triggered them, because you don't trigger them, it's internal. They got triggered, they were being punitive and acting out and doing whatever they were doing to you, and that they don't even know where that comes from. And so it can build up more emotional dysregulation and terror inside of lostness and overwhelm. And what do borderlines do when they're triggered to that? And it's not by you, it's internally. When that trigger comes back up again, and they're going through that again, they're always off-putting it. They have to always externalize it unless they're quiet and they're keeping it in, and that's a whole other thing. But still, they do a lot of things that hurt people, whether it's acting out or they act in and go away and whatever. And then one day they will explode on you in a way that ain't quiet, and you'll be like, what? Because you never knew you were with a borderline because they didn't cause any waves. But I don't want to digress too much. So the thing is that their discomfort that leads them to act out, abuse, and do what they're doing, which is not an excuse for it, they don't know where that came from. So that also gets them more like terrified, upset, emotionally dysregulated. And then you're there saying, hey, why did you do this? Because look, and I got this picture, or somebody's got a video and a picture. Somebody's got a video, picture, and an audio, and 6 people to say you just did this. And where they're at inside, the terror, the emotional dysregulation, they can't catch up, they can't think straight, still doesn't mean they've forgotten. But they're going to just be like, they want it to go away. So they're just going to be like, I didn't do it. I don't know what you're talking about. And come on, in the face of actual evidence, no, it's not they're forgetting. It's not BPD amnesia, whatever the actual, heck that is. I think I did a video on that because I remember a YouTuber, Fluff and Stuff Burgess, I don't care anymore, I'll just say it, because none of her information ever holds water, really. Never gets to the completion, never is deep enough. But she was talking about BPD amnesia. She brought it out. I don't know who else was talking about on YouTube prior, and she mentioned this, and I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. And sure, maybe it's a thing, but it's a very, very low percentage thing, and it would be 2 degrees as well. Very unlikely to be 100%, by the way, even if it was. And she said something about, oh, these borderlines, they have amnesia, blah, blah, blah. And then she was talking about something about a scenario of, I don't know, re-engaging with the borderline who whatever and had this apparent BPD amnesia and all this nonsense. Bottom line is, somewhere in that, because her stuff makes so little sense that it hurts my head to recall it anyway, she was then saying something about, at the same time, how they'll come back at you with all kinds of accusations and whatever. And it's like, how can you say it's BPD amnesia? They'll lie and say they forget. They don't know. What are you talking about? All that stuff. Crazy. It's really kind of borderline gaslighting. they're defending so much, and they want to shift it onto you because what they're experiencing inside, but they don't necessarily know what happened to them that got them to behave in a certain way that now you're trying to tell them, well, you just did all this, like, why? And they're like, ugh, and then they're just gonna lie because it's what they learned in childhood as well. And the point is that she was talking about, oh, they have this amnesia, yada yada. And the first thing that popped in my head was, yeah, they forget all this stuff, don't they? So like if they hoover you back or you have contact again, and they'll mention a whole lot of things, and maybe you're trying to hold them accountable, excuse me, and then they'll say something like, "But remember when," and it might be something that you said in an argument. "Remember when you said, remember when you did," or it might be what they had the initial problem with you about, which wasn't about you. But remember that Tuesday, like 10 months ago, a year and a half ago, when you in the kitchen and I and you didn't do. Tell me that they forget. Mm-mm. So I think I'm more or less, I will follow up with something else on BPD amnesia, but I think what it is in a small percentage of people with extreme borderline personality and or comorbidity, not necessarily with other cluster B things, but maybe with axis 1 dissociative disorders, which actually shouldn't have been separated out from BPD in the first place. So I think, commenter, you will have to see how you feel, or anybody that resonates with this, about the likelihood of what I've explained here versus what they did. And it's crazy making, but see, all these secondary things, it's crazy making, it's scary, and you said it's confusing, it's hurtful, bewildering. That's all very true. Whether you believe that they don't remember or they're lying to you. Because all it's crazy making behavior is what it is, which then I would say can also be described as unintentional, not on purpose, maybe not knowingly, believe it or not, all you like to push back against me. It's gaslighting, though, isn't it? It's not that they set out to gaslight, they're defending. Then they put you in the one down position, like all of a sudden, from somebody that can't control their emotions and can't stop abusing you, can't even relate to you, that can't attach to you, doesn't take in your love, can't love you, etc. Oh, from that place, they're going to say, "How dare you say I did that?" Or, "Why are you saying that? Why would you do something so hurtful to me?" After they abuse the crap out of you. "Why would you do that to me?" It's just that more victim. When they sink into victim, they also reenact stuff from childhood, wherein they're going to pull that some grandiosity in BPD, but they're going to pull the one up, "How dare you?" Because it's just a way of obfuscating. It's not a conscious thing. They think, "Oh, I'll do this now." Obfuscating, making you, yeah, it's gaslighting, but it's not intentional gaslighting. It's not gaslighting at the level of a narcissist gaslighting, and yet it is gaslighting because you're feeling confused, bewildered, understandably scared. And some people would say if it wasn't a physically threatening experience, they would sit down later and go like, "What?" Like, well, like I gave an example in another video. I'll try to find it and put it under this one, where borderlines can't repair any rupture and they don't take responsibility, etc. And I use this wacky example to be obvious. Borderline throws a cake on the wall. And you start asking them, "Why did you throw the cake on the wall?" And they're like, "What are you talking about?" Like, and then in the Jade conversation, and Darbo is involved in this and reversing and everything on you. And you're like, "But you threw a cake on the wall. It's right there. Look." And they won't look. And they'll be like, "What are you talking about? What cake? What?" And then what do? They go to, "Last Tuesday, you let the dog in and there was mud all over the carpet, but you didn't clean it up." It's like, that never even happened. Can they be partially going back to fragmented memories of childhood or things? Maybe. But wherever it's coming from, it's just like, I remember doing this, unfortunately, in my youth as well. It's because I learned to do it with my parents. They were crazy. And not everybody that has BPD like now had a necessarily cluster B crazy parent. I had two of them. But they would just come out of nowhere and accuse me of stuff. And of course, I didn't do it. And then if I did do something wrong, like I skipped school or something, I skipped school because I was overwhelmed, like parts of high school. I wasn't skipping school to do bad stuff. I was just in my room watching TV, just want to be left alone by the world. I was too stressed out. But like they were, so when I did something wrong, like when I skipped school and got caught, they didn't care. They were just mad they had to go to the office. And by the way, when we got into the office, they started to talk about the whole situation. And my father said, in my day, we would just never do and disobey our parents' way. And the counselor was about the same age as my parents. This is back in the early 70s when I was in high school. And and I was sitting there thinking, I want like negative attention that people with BP will seek. This is all part of this as well. That I was thinking, well, okay, I got caught on a lousy note that I wrote, and here we are. I wanted to be dealt with. I wanted a consequence. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be heard. And at the time, they're having this dialogue at the desk with the vice principal, who used to be my guidance counselor. That was awkward because I visited the guidance counselors a lot. I was a troubled kid. I mean, like not troubled acting out doing crimes, but like a kid in trouble inside. I'm sitting way back at the back of the office, and it's spring, and there's this mother bird taking care of the baby birds, and I'm all wrapped up in that, and I'm feeling like really a lot of pain emotionally, and I know what's going on over there. And so, in a way, I wanted to be held accountable, but I never really got those real experiences. Because my father would say, well, back in the day, my ba da 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 da, whatever he said. And then the vice principal said, oh, yeah. And then my father mentioned the high school that my mother and him went to. And the counselor said, I went to that school too. And oh my God, from that moment on, what happened to me? Invisible again. Not seen, not heard. Who cares why we're here? They had a lovely conversation, I guess, that they enjoyed. Not dealing with anything I did, which I was desperate for, like, somebody please see me, help me. So they were in their conversation, and I'm watching the birds. I've written a lot about this, years ago. It was so painful to be invisible yet again, to sort of be understanding part of it, but not all of it. And then watching the mother bird taking care of the baby birds, and I was feeling like, but my parents. And the thing is, like, I didn't put it all together that day. I would put it together in therapy after that. But that so my parents never held me accountable. And by the way, when we walked out of that office, I wanted to talk about it still. Like, I'm really sorry. Like, I wanted to get heard. And they said to me, never mind, doesn't matter. We just went home and they went about doing their own things. And I was sitting there feeling lost and empty and invisible. I didn't know what I was feeling or why. But the point is, I wanted accountability. I never got it. What I got from my cluster B alcoholic parents was when they were out of sorts or something affected their, weak egos or whatever, then they would come at me, and often they've been drinking, and it would be like my brother or the golden child narcissist, or I don't want to use that other word. But he'd do something that would piss them off, or I don't know. But then they'd say, but because he broke a glass in the kitchen, it's your fault. That's crazy making gaslighting. And so then they'd come at me and they'd accuse me and whatnot. But like, then I would just like, yeah, I would lie. I learned to evade. I learned to do whatever I needed to do to make them go away, to make them stop it. And sometimes in my childhood, I think I was also learning a little bit about gray rock without knowing what that was. Because there'd be times my mother would yell and scream at me, and I'd just go turn up the TV and I wouldn't even pay, and she'd walk away faster. And one day I was sitting there watching TV in the family room. My mother comes from the kitchen. We've had no interaction. I was just sitting watching TV. I didn't do anything. She comes down all in a rage, whatever's going on with her. This is crazy making to me, right? It's like when you're on the other side, like you are, and like I was explaining. And she's like, rah, 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 raging about something. And many a time it would hurt me and I would react, right? But I was 14, and on this particular day, besides other times I'd ignore her, I just looked at her and I went, are you having fun fighting with yourself? And she got madder, rage, you little, yeah. And I just went, well, do let me know when you're finished fighting with yourself, because I'm trying to hear the TV. And what I noticed about those times was, and it didn't necessarily work because my father was very physically violent, but my mother would definitely just walk away then. And you'd hear pots and pans flying in the kitchen. But it was like so why do I share these little, like, anecdotal things? Because it's I understand both sides. I understand when you're the person trying to drive the other person crazy who's driving you crazy because you just want it to go away, and you don't even know what it is, like when I was a kid with my parents, or I've been in a relationship with cluster B and, as well. But the thing is, to believe them when unfortunately most people with BPD are pathological liars, to the point where they have trouble when they lie discerning, remembering. Okay, they remember, but they can lose track for a bit in their emotions. They'll be feeling like what they said was real. They know it's a lie, they lied. And they'll be feeling, I had this happen to me way back. I would have lied to somebody. I would have manipulatively lied to somebody, okay? When I was like in my teens, early 20s with those issues with BPD. And to the extent I had them. And I would know that I lied to the person. What did I know I was manipulating? Not maybe necessarily at that point, but I was. And then for the rest of the day, I would, or for a time, or an hour or 2 or 3 hours, maybe 4 hours, I'd be feeling the emotions that went with the lie and the BS I told them to manipulate them and make them feel horrible about what they never even did to me. But, I didn't know what I was doing, but still horrible. And then I would still be feeling like as if I was in the situation that I lied about. And then I'd have to give my head a shake, go, no, 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 like, forget it. Remember, that's BS. You lied to her about that. So that can happen, and to varying degrees for people. But again, I didn't forget that I lied. It's the emotional feeling of what I was actually gaining from the lie. It felt like I was gaining something. I wasn't really gaining anything, but it felt like something that, quote, helped me in that moment or many of those moments. So people with BPD can lie, but emotionally feel like it's real when it's not, and they know it's not. And then they have to like shake that off at some point, or maybe some don't do that so well, but somewhere inside they know they lied. And what does this get to the edge of? There's another comment waiting for a response. I'll probably be doing this in a podcast. I don't know, but soon, I hope. And well, I'm doing this video right now with a series of videos I'm doing on the same day, so I shouldn't say these things this way. At the time you see this video, there may be something up or it's coming soon. Because what I just said about people with BP, they lie and they don't forget that they lied. They're manipulatively lying, but then they might feel the feelings that go with the lie until they remind themselves, wait a minute, I was lying to that person. I don't have to feel this now. And that gets to the verge and edge of what's the difference between when people with borderline personality disorder lie and when they're confabulating. Because confabulation doesn't have the same intent, etc., as lying. Yeah, confabulation doesn't have the same intent, etc., as lying does. So, and I'll have something coming on that, or at the time this video goes up, it may already be up. So the point being, when you are confronted, when you are being abused, and whether it's whatever stage of the relationship, whatever's happened, maybe they threw something at you, they're screaming at you, they're raging at you, they're chasing you around the house, they're yelling at you, you're trying to back up, whatever, or it's after a breakup, ghosting, discard, or not discard, but break up, and they're now, I got to get rid of this phone here. They're now telling you that they don't remember and they're lying and etc., and you don't know what to believe. And it's hard to know what to believe, but you just need to stand your ground that 95% of the time these people are lying to you to escape responsibility and accountability. And what does that mean? It means that you're not going to have success in getting them to own it or be responsible for it. So whatever's happening, you can't make them stop if they're still doing it. But what that is then is when you need to hold what you know to be true and stop trying to hold them accountable to them because it doesn't work and it drives you crazy. But know that if you're not already out of a relationship, it's time to get out of the relationship. Or if you're the favorite person or whatever the acquaintance or relationship type, it's time to back away. It's time to get out. If you're a family member, you might need low contact or you might need to work with someone. I'm out here. If you resonate with me, to work with you. If it's a family member, if it's an ex, if it's revenge and punishment and revenge now after a breakup, or if it's happening within the relationship, on and off in your relationship recycling. Most of them remember, maybe not every single word, maybe not every single detail, but they friggin' know, and especially when you show them evidence, they're lying to you. And they have elaborate, not as elaborate as narcissists, but people with BPD have these elaborate go-to repetition compulsion. It's false self-defense strategy that just happens almost automatically when they're confronted with what they've just done or said or both, and they're just going to, like, often because it's from childhood, like that was my experience, you're just going to lie and say, don't know what you're talking about, because they're also unconsciously re-experiencing inside and all this emotional turmoil that whipped them up to whatever they friggin' did, which is not excusable. They're also experiencing something that they don't know where it came from, so they get terrified, even though they're terrifying you often. They get terrified and they have to externalize that. That's what led them to be punishing, vindictive, abusive in the first place, raging, yelling, all that. And then when you try to hold them accountable, it starts that whole automatic protective mechanism all over again that begins with them lying like they probably had to lie when they were traumatized in childhood. And so that's not the same with every single person with BPD, but I'm gonna commit to this. I don't know this for sure, but to bring home my point in this video, I would say it's like 95% of people. If there's any BPD amnesia and whatever that is, 95% of people with BPD aren't having that. So, and again, I'll just reiterate from my own experience, when I had done some of the worst things I'd done, but in rages, I would often be triggered, but it wasn't like somebody else's fault. I thought that then. But I would be triggered, and I know from therapy, like years ago, what I was then experiencing when I was triggered, whatever I knew that meant. I probably didn't use the word triggered, but I'd be like to my partner at that time back in, the early 1980s. I'd be like, "She did it," whatever I was feeling. That would just be automatic. Her fault. And so whatever I was feeling that probably came from inside of myself in my past, boom, I'd be yelling and raging, and she might have done something or not, but it doesn't mean that deserved the reaction that I gave it, or that wasn't where all my reaction was coming from. I didn't have a clue. It would just happen, and that doesn't excuse it. And then I'd put it out on her, and because what do borderlines feel in the middle of all this emotional dysregulation? Whatever they're doing, whatever parts of it they know intentionally they're doing, but how it emotionally dysregulates them anyways, and or they're dysregulated when they start to do what they're doing, even if they know what they're doing. It's all because they experience something emotionally dysregulating inside. It's internal, it's usually from the past, comes from the unconscious. They feel all this stuff. And they are terrified and feeling like they're going to get annihilated. And from those feelings in a situation with you or anybody out there, they then need to externalize that. So when they start abusing you, they start raging you, they do all this, whether they know they're doing it, why they're doing it, some know what they're doing, etc. But they often don't know the impact it's having on you because they're too wrapped up in what they're going through and they don't understand where self ends and other begins. And you might be object other parent, and then they feel like it's all okay to do this. It's not. I mean, it's not. So the other thing about that is they're now going to externalize all what's going on inside of them, and it's very painful for them, it's traumatizing, it's terrifying, etc., but you have nothing to do with it. It's not your fault. When they get triggered to all this stuff, it has nothing to do with you. I can tell you that from the inside out, because when I learned about all this, when I went through therapy and healed and recovered, I was shocked that it was really all coming from in me, and that a lot of what was coming from in me, yes, happened in my childhood and what I went through with the parents. but still had to heal all of that. So when they get to that point where they're raging, abusing, punishing, seeking revenge, whatever they're doing, and some of that they'll damn well know what they're doing, yes, and some not so much, and whatever. When they're already there, they're already revved up and dysregulated and in repetition compulsion, automatic false self-protection mode of all, splitting and lying and one-upmanship and going from victim to persecutor, etc. And so then when you try to hold them accountable, which you have every right to do, it's just kind of useless to do it with them, but you need to hold them accountable in your own reality and knowing of what just happened and what that means for the relationship, and or you know if it's punishment revenge after the relationship's over, and it's smear campaign, harassing others, lying about you, then you got to do what you can do legally, but you don't need to be talking to them about it, because you're just going to be driven crazy, scared, get confused, start doubting yourself, because that's what codependence, that's the first go-to. Oh, I'm sorry. You've just been abused, yelled at, punished, but you go to, oh, okay, well, if you don't remember, oh my God, don't do that. Don't do that. That's starting to give the borderline the benefit of the doubt. Don't give them the benefit of the doubt. Believe yourself. Believe the evidence you have. Believe what you just went through. Believe what you saw and you heard. And hooey, whether they actually remember it or not. But most of them do. But the other thing that's key in this is after you've been through this, hopefully once, some people will go through it time and time again. You need to get away from that person, because the effect this is having on you, not only the punishment, the revenge, the vindictiveness, the abuse, all what they're doing to you, how they're traumatizing you. Don't give them another opportunity, benefit of the doubt, to do it to you all over again. Because the more it happens to people, when they're not really aware of what's happening exactly, or you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, your codependency takes over, you're not looking after yourself, the more repetitions of that, the more times you go through that, pardon me, the more your defenses are being broken down and you're just losing yourself. And then the less able you are to cope with, like, you're showing them evidence and they're like, I didn't do that. Who did? And then they start, maybe, and they might use all kinds of other language, but then when they start into the, how dare you tell me that I would do, because you're nuts, you're crazy, you're this, you're that. And they go, right? Persecutor, one up, because they need to make you feel like crap, ignoring or not being aware of totally everything they've just done, but not forgetting it either. It's a BPD mechanism. It's like, oh, you're going to come at me with stuff, even though you're coming at them with the truth. I'll get you for that. More punishment and revenge. I'll show you. And what do? They go to the persecutor extraordinaire, forget the victim. How dare you? I wouldn't do something like, there's something wrong with you. And they know, I don't know if they know consciously, doesn't matter, but they're putting you in the one down so they can feel all better about themselves. And on a deeper level, what is all this about? Like the dysregulation that got them to what they're doing in the first place and whatever. And they're responsible for that. And then all they've been through emotionally, but they put you through a ton and a half in many different ways. They're not really aware of that part. Like they might be trying to get you back and they know that. But are they really, like, yeah, sometimes they might be seeing what you're going through. And then the point is, at the end of it, when you try to hold them accountable or you do it later, whatever. But if it happens in, like, at the same time, you're like, well, why did you do this? Or like my example in the other video, why'd you throw the cake on the wall? And 15 minutes later, you're in a Jake Darbo conversation from hell, and you're like, you forgot. You don't even remember that the cake you can see on the wall, that they threw it on the wall, that's what you started to try to hold them accountable for. And you're like, huh? They've said so much to you about what you did. And so it can be like that, or it can be that one-upmanship. They're trying to put, like, they're putting you down, they're abusing you further, they're hurting you. Sometimes they don't really know what they're doing, to be honest, but it's horrible and it's inexcusable. But they are just trying to feel better. And you should never let a borderline try to feel better with all the things that they need to do because they were triggered to emotional dysregulation, maybe some kind of dissociative and feeling, and the past coming into the now and the now and the they're just trying to discharge everything they feel. And that is the single most thing that's on their mind. Even when they're seeking punishment and revenge, yes, they'll know they're seeking punishment and revenge. I'm going to get him. I'm going to get her. I'll show her not to F with me. Or I'll show him not to F with me. They're already in that grandiose one up place, right? Because they're out of their minds at that point. They're not making any sense. And it's their past reality that's in them in the here and now dissociatively that drives all of that in the first place. Then, if you show them something or you try to hold them accountable, especially at the same time, they're already getting exhausted. They are not like what's happening inside of them is all consuming. And now all they want to do is just get you to stop it. Even it's ridiculous, isn't it? They've done all this to you, and you're supposed to leave them alone. But that's exactly how it goes for them because they're just trying to discharge all their emotional dysregulation and then some and whatever else might be going on because they think that's all your fault too. And it's not. Nobody is responsible for triggering a borderline. The borderline is responsible for how they're triggered and why. Just as people with codependency are going to find out how your codependency, woundedness you might not have been aware of or you disavowed from your childhood, how what they're doing is triggering you even more than what they're doing to you, but also it might start to trigger things from your past, but there's what they're doing to you now. So anyway, maybe I went too long on this. Maybe I'm trying to say too much at once or go too deep. I don't know. Point is, most of them remember most of what they did. And they're lying feverishly because they have no emotional ability. They have no ability, they lack a self, right? So this isn't excusing them. It's just explaining further that at this point, they'll just get to a certain point where like they're already like doing whatever they're doing. They might know what they're doing. It's trying to seek revenge on you. They might be really mad about something and they're being abusive. But at the end of it all, it's like, you're not going to hold me responsible. And they might not have that all together. But this idea that they forget all that they're doing or they just did, no, really not bloody likely. 95% of the time, maybe even more. So I'm going to look more into the BPD but it's not memory loss because at most it's going to be repressed trauma that can also then a person with BPD, how do they get triggered? Okay, and let me just say this real quick. How do they get triggered? They get triggered because there's something existing in them pain, woundedness, trauma. You look at your watch and they feel abandoned, and then all of a sudden they're off to the races like, why did you look at your watch? You don't really love me, do you? Abandonment fear is kicked off and it's been triggered, but it's internal to them. All you did was look at your watch. Now you're going to endure a half an hour rage because you don't really love them and you're going to abandon them and the hell with you anyways and blah, 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 blah. So see, you looked at your watch, they got triggered. Those two things aren't related except for how the borderline has internal triggers already that go to you looking at your watch. So remember, you're not responsible for their triggers. When you're trying to hold them accountable and they give you all this crap about, even in the face of evidence, I didn't do that, I don't remember, I don't know. They're just trying to escape responsibility and accountability. And at that point, they don't care about anything except now they're feeling too stressed. Can you believe it? After all they've just done to you? So, point being to you, commenter, I really believe what you said, that they knew a lot of that, if not all of it. And then you started to doubt yourself because they seem so genuine. But how many times has a borderline lied to you? And you probably know it then too, but that it doesn't maybe seem genuine. You know why there's a little bit of sometimes really feeling genuine with these borderlines that are lying? Because where the base of where that lie is coming from in their past, dissociatively now in the here and now, there is maybe a piece of truth to it, but it's not about you and them in the here and now. It's again something from their past. Repetition compulsion cycle acting out. And so most of them definitely aren't lying. You shouldn't let them off the hook. But the point is, you can't enforce the hook unless they're doing stuff that you can call the police about. The other thing, though, is when you're getting presented with this kind of stuff that will help, make you doubt yourself, feel scary and confusing, and it's very injurious and traumatic, you need to get the HE double hockey sticks away from them. So I hope that was helpful because this idea of memory loss, because people with BPD are lying, they don't remember what they just did or said or all of it, might not remember all of it. It's not about memory loss, really. And amnesia itself in BPD, for what that might mean to a small percentage of people with severe borderline personality disorder. And you might have been through so much with your person with BPD that you just assume they have to be the severest of the severest because it's horrible. When they might not be, but still, who cares about that? Just know, yeah, 95% of the time, they're totally bullshitting you. And then you give the benefit of the doubt, and you're all messed up because you want to know for sure. Just like my example, the cake's on the wall, but when you listen to them for a while, you're not even aware anymore the cake's on the wall. So you always need to dig in your heels. Don't really try to be taking it back to the borderline, because if they're doing something to punish you with revenge and it's after a breakup, you probably need to be calling the police about whatever that behavior is about. You need to take care of yourself. You need to know that you know what you know. And when they lie and dance and one-up you and go from victim to persecutor, and they're very good at defending themselves that way because they're well practiced at it, but it's abuse. Don't give them the benefit of the doubt. You know what you know. It just might not be what you actually want to accept.